Okay, hello everyone, and I'm looking forward to having a wonderful conversation today. We have Jason with us today. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited about this.
Oh,
Something new
yes,
and fun.
this is new and fun. So, some of you might know that we have a Smashing TV, and Smashing TV is all about running some sort of webinars and sessions and interviews and all that. And we always look for new adventures. Jason, you like adventures?
Very much.
Who doesn't like adventures? And so, in these particular adventures, we were looking into actually just having conversations. Like, you take a cup of coffee and you sit down with the person you admire or you like, or you feel like they have something to share. You just have a conversation. And so, this is not about slides, this is not about presenting. It's all about really just kind of human interaction between two people genuinely interested in a particular topic. And so, for that, I'm very privileged to have Jason with us today, who is going to be the interviewer and who is going to introduce the speaker that or the person who is going to speak with. And Jason, we just came from Smashing Conf San Francisco 2 weeks ago, and it was a wonderful experience because Jason would just come on stage and sit down and take a cup of coffee and walk through his design process and stuff. And he is very curious, right? And so this is something that you need in a person who can run interviews really well. So you might see Jason more often in the future. Maybe Jason, you can introduce yourself. What do you do for life? What's the meaning of life
Sure.
for you?
Well, I guess suppose in the order of frequency, it's spending time with my wife, walking the dogs, which most people see on Instagram, riding my bike, and then a whole lot of stuff about typography, which is what I was demonstrating when I was at Smashing San Francisco. But the thing that is sort of common for me that runs through is just being curious about stuff and like learning new things. So the chance to actually learn from more amazing people who are going to be getting on stage at other smashing events was too good to pass up. So I'm pretty excited about this.
We couldn't be more excited to have you. So I think it's time for me to get my breakfast. I'm sorry, I'm so hungry. I woke up like 4 hours ago. It was all about meetings and all. And Jason will take over. And so, Jason, have a wonderful time. I'm looking forward to see you when we're wrapping up the session. Okay,
Great.
Jason, the
Th-
stage is yours.
Thanks, Vitaly. Well, I'm super excited about this for a whole bunch of reasons, but the main one is I get to introduce to you someone who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the first time you're speaking at a smashing event. Is that true?
Yes, it is the first time.
Okay. Well, and so the voice that you're hearing and the face that you're seeing is Jenny Shen, who is a UX and localization consultant who's worked with all kinds of big brands, including Neiman Marcus, Crate and Barrel, and IBM, in the course of your travels over the web of a number of years, which has some pretty amazing lists of credentials. I mean, some things that really stood out to me that actually I think kind of made you a little bit more compelling in terms of like who I really wanted to talk to first, is that not only are you doing all of this incredible work, but you're also a regional director for EMEA for Ladies at UX, which is an amazing organization, and you also started your own mentorship program, and that teaching aspect, I think is one of the things that I love about getting up on stage and giving talks and workshops and stuff. So before we actually jump into what you're going to be talking about, I'd really love to hear a little bit more from you about your journey from Taipei to where you are now
Mhm.
to how you came to be in this industry.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Jason, for the amazing introduction. Yeah, from so as you were saying, I actually, well, I started from Taipei. I was born in Taipei, Taiwan, and yeah, like my journey with, I move around in a lot of places. My family moved to Canada, and I studied there. I studied in Vancouver, Canada,
Oh,
and
wow.
then yeah, I studied interaction design. Well, at the time it was like human computer interaction.
Right.
And then I moved to like Singapore, and now I'm based in the Netherlands, consulting regarding UX project, localization project, and just like you mentioned, I am a volunteer EMEA director at Ladies UX, and I also run my own mentorship program in the spare time. And yeah, I also been speaking in
Because you must have a load
conferences.
of spare time then.
Most of the time.
So, like, tell me a little bit about sort of the typical day for you, if there is one?
Hmm. Typical day. These days, I have more of a typical day because I'm working with my clients, and then I am basically just taking my to-do list and doing the job that like can help the organization, can help shape product strategy, offer feedback to designers, do some consulting on localization, working on research, and yeah, like a typical day, Um, I could be reviewing a design, giving feedback to my design team. I could be helping a client with more of an approach to hire the designer, and I could be running a workshop on product strategy, like really, talking about business model canvas and value proposition.
Mhm.
And some days I'm drafting like a user research strategy, and on Sundays I am flying over to a different country to actually conducting on-site localization and culture research. So yeah, there's not really like a typical day because I really do a different types of
Right.
work, types of projects, and I get to work with really amazing clients.
That's amazing. I've also looked at, I mean, I've looked at your resume. Your speaking schedule last year was incredible. I mean, you were at some of the best events in the web. You're
Mhm.
speaking on all kinds of different things. I'm, it makes me feel so monotonous. All I ever do is talk about web typography, and you seem to cover an incredible range of topics. That's really is fascinating to me, and I love that your focus is so um, well-rounded in that it's not just about UX. It's also about how design can impact the business, and um, that's something that I think is really fascinating, and it's really starting to gain a lot of prominence with research from Envision and McKinsey about what design can bring to the rest of the organization. So is how long has that been more the focus about like business model innovation and all those kinds of strategic topics?
Yeah, I actually just transitioned from a designer to a strategist in a little bit more than a year ago. I've been
Really?
in the design, yeah, I've been in the design industry for like 6, 7 years, and I've been doing, wireframe, the same type of thing the designer would do, wireframes, prototypes, like icons and stuff like that. And it was to a point I really want to be more involved in the business side of things, and I really now that I in this role for like more than a year, I really see how being more business minded and um, being aware of the business goal and how that need to like work together with a strategy and a design to actually move the needle. So yeah, like the starting point just because I've been a designer for like 6, 7 years and I really want to do more. I really want to actually see the impact of my designs. So that seems like the natural step. And I've been learning from a lot of experts from my community, as well as going to different conferences and listen and learn from those people who do strategy and are leading design. So yeah, I'm very honored to have a chance to be in those conferences and learn from these leaders.
That's really amazing. I mean, I think, I mean, I hope we'll have time to come back to that a little bit because I think a lot of designers, as they advance in their career, really look for ways that they can achieve a greater level of impact than just this one project they're working on. And I think it's really hard for designers to kind of figure out where they can go.
Yeah.
So that's amazing to hear that you've made such a great transition. And I feel I can't help but think that there's a really great relationship between um, multilingual, multicultural, and localization as this sort of central part of business strategy and how it relates to design. And I gather that's kind of what you're going to be talking about in San Francisco. Is that, I'm sorry, in Toronto. Is that true?
Yeah, so my talk will be on more of a how culture affect the design, and then I'll also be touching on how like what are some of the reasons like how can companies benefit from localization? How can companies benefit from expanding into a new market? So these are the type of things that I want to talk about in my talk in Toronto, as well as showcasing some case studies. How do reputable companies, how do big companies approach
Hmm.
localization and market expansion? Because I have been doing this, like specifically designs with multiple cultures since 2013, and I've
Hmm.
definitely learned a lot, and then also learned from the companies who are, really experts in doing internationalization and localization. So yeah, I'm really excited to share about this.
That that's really great. I mean, I think for a lot of people, when they think about a language addition to a website, um, they kind of lump adding the language into what people refer to when they say internationalization. But I know, I mean, I learned a ton from listening to Robin Larson from Shopify talk about their work over the past year or so in adding multiple languages to their system. But the phrase you used was localization, and that was the thing that really stuck out to me, and what I wanted to ask you about, because that
Mhm.
was something Robin spoke about, where it's not just the language, but it's the phrasing and it's the cultural things about other aspects of design. So I'd love to hear more about what that means to you, like when you're designing, and the kinds of things that you consider in adding a language, whether it's English and Chinese, or Korean, or whatever the other, like the other kind of cultural implications that go along with that.
Yeah, so regarding localization, for me, it means in all kinds of ways, like how to adapt a product, an interface, an application to meet the needs, the preferences, expectations, and behaviors of the local users. So, like you mentioned, it's not just about translation, but there are many things from icons, from symbols and colors, and sometimes there's text direction, and of course the content, all these sort of things that can help a local user feel like, hey, this app or this software is designed with me in mind. It's just not some foreign company. They only hire some translators and then expect me to, feel connected to the product. So localization, that's what it means for me, and that's the kind of work that I like to do.
Hmm. And so how often is that work? And so just for frame of reference, I've mostly worked on web content management systems.
Hmm.
So when that, when that first comes up, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, I need to add a language pack. I need to, factor this into the language encodings for the theme, and that sort of thing. Um, but I know there's a lot of other considerations, and there's a whole range of what people work with, from things that are, sort of static sites where you have a lot of freedom to customize things, but I think a lot of us end up dealing with either it's an app infrastructure or a website infrastructure that has to support those multiple languages. So what
Hmm.
kind of scenarios have you had to deal with in terms of the technology behind, um, and how you, I'm trying to phrase this better. Um, in sort of implementing that design, and finding the freedom to change the icons, to change the phrasing, to change, to make it feel connected. Um,
Hmm.
are you often involved in the technical implementation of that, or at least mapping things properly?
So actually on the technical side, not really. And there's really different kinds of clients. And then some of them I come into a project and they have already things mapped out. And then usually when I come in is when they have decided a market, or maybe they're thinking about localization. They haven't decided what market, but they have the infrastructures in place. So I can't really speak to about the technical infrastructure, but then I'm thinking like what might be useful for someone to know about like my role in the process, um, and how to actually even think about, well, should we change this icon? It's all related to, we should think about the business case of localization. I mean, we
Hmm.
don't do it just because we can, we don't do it just because it's fun, but localization or expanding to a different market or supporting multiple languages, there must be, well, there should be a business reason behind it. It's because, we want to expand markets, right, to a, we want to expand to a different market. We want to reach the users, and definitely we are hoping for some success metrics from that market. And if we deem that this is a market that's likely to succeed, or we want to experiment, and then the users of that culture or of that market, and they have a strong tendency to, let's say, go for applications that are more, feel more native, feel more intuitive,
Hmm.
and as user experience practitioners, like we know that designing the user experience like is going to make the users more loyal, more engaged. So it's also considering like the user experience business metric to decide, okay, do we want to have this customization available? Do we even want to
Hmm.
customize it? Or do we just want to go for like the minimum localization effort, which typically is translations and content localization?
Hmm. And so how often does it go further than that? So I mean, the things that come to mind that we had kind of gone back and forth a little bit in the questions beforehand. Um, Language length or color or typography or layout. How often does that come into play?
That's a really good question. I would say that it really depends on the industry. It depends on the company stage. It also depends on like where are they, what their business goals are. For just a startup, it's unlikely that they will, fully customize it. They will maybe even not
Mhm.
expanding to multiple market when they are just figuring out their product market fit. But let's say for a really established company like Spotify, Shopify as well, they already have a like a market that's home market that's doing really
Mhm.
well, then they want to expand. And for for some target market where they have really distinct culture, like Japan, for example, or there's a lot of different like influences, and that can actually affect the layout and all the localization element. For example, Singapore or China, and then we look at evaluating, okay, what do we have to do to be successful in that market? In
Mhm.
some market, it might not be necessary. Like maybe um, for some markets, you might require like less changes than the other. So I would say like this is a really, it depends, kind of a
Sure.
UXC answer, to kind of for us to know like what is actually required and
Mhm.
how often does it actually go beyond the basic localization.
Right. And so in your role, sort of advising your clients on these sorts of things, does it do you actually go so far as think about what would the team look like that can do this successfully? Like what kinds of designers and skill sets you would want to see to help them be successful?
hmm Yeah, in my experience, the localization team, then again, depending on like the stage and depending on like at the beginning
Sure.
of setting up a team, let's say if they haven't got a team set up, usually there is a localization team that kind of take care of the localization elements, like or maybe some to make sure there is consistency, but there's also like certain customization elements for the different market. But while the other product team could be focused on specific features. So let's say like the home market team, they design the checkout flow. The localization team will then take that checkout flow and customize it for different market. And depending on the company size, some more established companies, they could have like the Germany team, the Netherlands team, the Nordics team, the LATAM team, to actually hire people who are aware of the culture differences, aware
Right.
of the local expectations, the legal requirements, and all those things that can actually make or break the product. Either hire people on the ground or they hire people,
Hmm.
with that experience, with that knowledge in their
Right.
office. So there's really multiple ways you can go about it. And
Sure.
what's really most necessary is people with that knowledge, people with that culture understanding who can actually um, design for that target market.
That's great. I think that kind of leads into a couple other things that I really wanted to ask you about. And one is, I mean, your background just geographically is so varied. How how much has that influenced your career direction in terms of like what interests you and the kinds of things that you've wanted to focus on?
Yeah, you know what? Like when I was still studying, what people always like set out their career goal, like what I want to be, and then, like in 5 years, 10 years, what I want to do. I honestly have never thought that I would be in this industry, in the localization industry, and um, I really love what I do, and I think the reason why I'm doing this and maybe like what shaped my path going here is just having curiosity, towards other culture, toward the world. And I guess as I travel more and more, as my mind starts open and to really understand like culture differences, like the local ways of life, and being a UX designer, like understanding how important it is to, have our product user centered. Then I look at people who live in other countries, and then seeing, what kind of things do they actually use, what kind of apps, what kind of website, and how that's so different from what we know and what we are accustomed to. I'm like, let's say when that's one of the reasons, like curiosity. I really love to travel, and I also have moved to many countries, like just to really be immersed in the local culture, really connect with the local people, try to learn some local language. I'm terrible at Dutch, but yeah, I try where I can. But I
Yeah.
think it really has enriched my life, really has enriched my professional experience. I mean, when I moved to Singapore, that's actually how it gave me the opportunity to design for Malaysia and Philippines and Indonesia and like countries in that region. And then when I moved to Amsterdam, I actually was able to design for Spain and France and Germany and Turkey, like all the countries in this region. So I feel very blessed, and I really love what I do. And I think, again, my curiosity and my passion for traveling definitely has played a role in this.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it. So, if you were to try and take, well, so there's two parts to this one. Um, I'm wondering if there's something that you would want, if you could go back to do differently. Like, is there something that you wish you had learned more? I mean, you've moved into business strategy quite a bit more. Um, do you wish you had studied business any like more like what are the sorts of things that you're looking to fill in now that you maybe wish you had learned earlier?
Yeah, I think about it sometimes, and I think it might have been quite helpful if I studied like business administration. But at the same time, having a degree in design and having like a solid training background in research, I think that's also like a huge asset, because
Sure.
oftentimes I talk to clients and then they actually need a researcher. They need somebody who has like done this a lot, and as somebody who understands the science behind user interviews, usability tests, and how to like minimize bias in the whole research
Hmm.
process. So I feel like maybe I should have studied business, but then at the same time I'm also really happy I studied design. So
Sure.
that something that I'm definitely trying to make up, where I don't have so much expertise like regarding the business side, is just I am talking to experts in this
Hmm.
area. I am reading books, I'm listening to podcasts. But definitely, if someone who wants to take on the strategist role, I would say like that would be really helpful. And right now, that's actually something that, rather than the design, what tools to use, I am definitely more interested to learn about the business side of things.
Hmm. Yeah, that's at an agency I worked at a few years ago. A bunch of us actually took a Coursera class
Mhm.
together and like had a little discussion every week about and it was an MBA focused program to like learn about business model structures and what is a business model canvas and all of those kinds of things. And that was really fascinating. I certainly
Mhm.
appreciated that. Um, so one the other side of that thing that I of that last question was your advice to designers who are looking to do more work like this. So what are the kinds of things that if a designer wants to understand localization more and start to move into this world, what kinds of advice would you have for them?
Mhm. I think one thing that quite helped me to do my work in localization is just to again be curious, not just curious and physically traveling, but let's say as a designer who might not have the opportunity to go abroad and do a research trip in another country, we can at least look at international tech news. Like I still stay in touch with my contact in Singapore, and I read tech news in Southeast Asia, in Taiwan, in other countries where there's English versions available. and at least like the language I can read. And you can also like download apps or go on websites and really just try to be more aware of how designs or how the software can be different. And definitely definitely keep an eye out what the other companies are doing in other markets. Like that is
Hmm.
definitely really, really interesting. We can follow those news like TechCrunch, the Next Web. There's a lot of news sources just to, kind of keep an eye out and also kind of learn from what people are actually doing regarding um, localization.
That's amazing. Great. That's awesome advice. Thank you. So the last thing I'm going to ask you about, and I think we're probably getting close to a good time to wrap up, but for you now with all of these things that you're doing, what's getting you really excited? What's the new thing that you see coming that you're really excited to learn about and incorporate in the work that you do?
Something that's really new and really exciting. For me personally, I'm just really happy that more and more people are speaking about localization and sharing their knowledge. Like what you just said, like Robin. Robin is great, and I really also like the work that she does. And so people like her, people like me who are sharing, raising the awareness of importance of considering the local cultures, considering, the nuances. When developing a localized product. Yeah, overall, I'm just happy that we are people are raising awareness of this issue, and that sorry,
That's
and
okay.
yeah, and that I really hope that more and more companies who are actually doing it would be on stage or like writing and speaking more about it, so then other people we can ultimately learn from the successful companies. Because I'm sure like Facebook does a lot of things, Dropbox does a lot of things, but then it's just that so far we haven't seen people actively talking about localization or
Hmm.
internationalization. So that's something that I'm really excited about.
That's great. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. I can't thank you enough. And for anyone who's going to be in Toronto, I hope that if any of you are listening, I hope you'll take this to heart. Go say hi to Jenny. Tell her how much this work has influenced you. It's such a big part of being at these events to be able to talk to people and learn more about what they're working on. Um, don't hesitate. That's what we're all there for. Um, we're all learning together. Some of us have just read a couple pages ahead and are happy to share what we learned. Thank you so much, Jenny. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much, Jason, and so happy to take part in this. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much, both of you, for actually making it all happen. Wonderful interview and also wonderful insights from you, Jenny. Thank you so much for that. Just a quick note from me. So this is just one of the like little sessions that we have about the people who are going to kind of speak at our conferences, but also just interesting people doing interesting work. So this is important. I think it's at this point there is a lot of value of highlighting people who are kind of passionately and working hard behind the scenes, doing incredible work to change the world. So this is kind of our humble attempt to bring a little bit of spotlight to these people. So with this in mind, thank you so much for watching, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Thanks to Jenny, thanks to Jason. See you next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you both. Bye.
Bye.